on today's Story Beat.
I think the most important thing is to be careful who you listen to. You have to listen to yourself first. My dad always said you had to develop a thick skin, but not let it hurt the soft interior, because you don't want to become hard and jaded. But you have to be able to take rejection. You have to be able to take criticism, and you don't want it to hurt you. You don't want it to destroy you as a person or an artist. So you have to develop a really strong spirit, I think.
Sinatra used to say that he was acting all the time he was a kid in front of the big bands and just didn't know it. Because at the end of the day, an actor and a singer, they're both storytellers. Great songs are little scenes, little stories.
This is StoryBeat with Steve Cuden, a podcast for the creative mind. StoryBeat explores how masters of creativity develop and produce brilliant works that people everywhere love and admire. So join us as we discover how talented creators find success in the worlds of imagination and entertainment. Here now is your host, Steve Cuden.
Thanks for joining us on Story Beat. We're coming to you from the Steel City, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My guests today, Maripat Davis and Richard Osborn, burst onto the cabaret scene with sold-out California engagements at the Gardenia in Hollywood and Sterling's Upstairs at Vitello's in Studio City. Their first show, entitled Let's Fall in Love, featured a potpourri of classic American love songs from the 30s, 40s, and beyond, taking a fun and sentimental look at the many moods of love from first blush to a lifetime love affair. Their second show, Moonlight and Love Songs, took them on a romantic journey through many of the memorable songs from the silver screen, past and present. In addition to numerous appearances at the Gardenia, they've also performed at the Ten20 Club and the Vermont in Los Angeles, the Central California Cabaret Series with Broadway star Luba Mason, Billy Reed's, Azul's, the Annenberg Theater in Palm Springs, and the Laurie Beechman Theater in New York. Maripat began performing at the age of 6. She's also an actress and dancer with credits in theater, film, TV, concerts, nightclubs, cabarets, radio, and records. Richard, too, is an actor with an extensive background in musicals, as well as classical and contemporary theater. Maripat and Richard's shows highlight their strong vocals, beautiful harmonies, special arrangements, and an on-stage chemistry punctuated by moments of great humor. Their shows run the emotional gamut from lighthearted to poignant. The common thread uniting all of it is a celebration of life, love, and romance. Please be sure to check out their beautiful album, Here's to Love. So for all those reasons and many more, it's a real privilege for me to welcome the exceptionally talented Maripat Davis and Richard Osborn to StoryBeat today. Maripat and Richard, welcome to the show.
Great to be with you, Steve.
Great to be here.
Well, I'm delighted to have you. So let's go back in time a little bit, and I'll ask each of you. Both of you have been performing for some time now, and I'm wondering, how old were you? Well, we know Maripat was 6, but when did you realize that you had special vocal ability, that you could sing? How old were you then? We'll start with Maripat.
Oh my gosh. I was a kid in the neighborhood who would put on the shows and direct the kids, and because my dad was a director as well, and I would I think, gosh, from the time I can remember, I was singing and dancing, and I think that's all I ever wanted to do.
Were you singing when you were 6 as well?
Yeah, I was singing a little bit. Yeah, things from Finian's Rainbow, my parents' show that they met in on Broadway, and that was always a special show to my family, and I knew that show. I knew all the songs backwards and forwards, and so yes, I would sing songs from Finian's Rainbow, and I sort of got really familiar with all the traditional like 40s, 50s songs that my dad loved. And so I sort of had really old taste for a kid. I knew all the old songs. But yeah, probably I made my first demo as a teenager. It's kind of a pop demo. And then I did a country song that was accompanying a TV pilot I did when I was in my 20s. And was approached by the songwriters to demo some of their original tunes and have me sing the songs for them, and then they sent them off to Nashville. And I thought, yeah, sure, I'll do that. Sounds like a great opportunity. And that's when I started getting feedback on my voice a lot from A&R people in Nashville.
So in other words, you waited until you had done that many things before you realized you maybe had something worth doing?
I guess I I guess I felt like I had a voice when I was a teenager, but I never had a huge ego, if you will. So I think I was always thinking, I have a lot to learn. I have, my mom was a singer, and I knew how hard my folks had worked, all their life. So it was something that I thought you had to earn, and felt like I was a student for a long time. Even though I started teaching dance at 16, I was always teaching and learning and growing. And I think it probably wasn't until I got feedback from A&R people that I had a good voice that my confidence developed, I
But in
guess.
other words, you've been a trooper since you were a baby, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tons of girls,
And,
yeah.
and Richard, when did you first realize you had vocal talent, that it was something that might have been interesting for you to pursue?
Well, I'd say it was probably in high school because when I went to Hollywood High. So you'd think it would have more veered into the acting world because of the reputation of that campus. But actually, I auditioned for the school choir and got in as a bass baritone, and it wasn't like a Glee or a Glee Club thing.
Right.
It was a pretty legit choir. Our music director and teacher, Joe Hoffrichter, had quite an extensive background in classical vocal music as well as being a composer himself. So that's when I really started singing and thinking that, this may be something that I could, derive some fulfillment and happiness
Were
with.
people at the time telling you had a great voice?
That I don't recall, but I do. I got, as mothers often do. My mom seemed to think I had something special vocally, and I got a lot of her. I derived a lot from her love of music. She was constantly playing jazz and show tunes. She played Man of La Mancha like until it wore out, basically. So, I
Did you
picked
know
up a lot of
Finian's
that.
Rainbow as well?
I did not know that until many years later, and we will get to that part of the story, folks. So stay tuned.
Good.
But I also befriended someone. I used to spend a lot of time at all the bookstores on Hollywood Boulevard when I was growing up as a kid, and got to know a guy who had an extensive musical theater collection, and he turned me on to a lot of other stuff, and I soon became very influenced by one of the top, probably the top male star of musicals in the 1940s and 50s, and that was Alfred Drake.
Alfred Drake, the great Alfred Drake.
The great Alfred Drake, who, of course, was the star of Oklahoma and Kiss Me Kate and Kismet, among others. And he became my role model. So it was kind of that, combination of musical leading man that I thought was very attractive and inspiring. And that's kind of the, direction I felt that I wanted to go in.
So Mary Pat, did you have a similar person that influenced you, or people that influenced you aside from your parents, which is obvious?
Aside from my parents, one of my favorite singers ever who I had all the records, was Judy Garland. She was my favorite. Yeah.
And,
think
and so you emulated her to some extent.
I did. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Did you try to sing like her too?
No, I think my musical taste when I was a teenager was, like I said earlier, kind of mature and older. My friends were, what are you singing? And I'm singing 40s and 50s songs and, Get Happy and stuff that Judy Garland sang, and loved that stuff. And so my musical taste was totally sort of shaped by Judy Garland. And I just loved the warmth and richness in her voice.
Mm-hmm. So did you have formal training? Did you go to school for your voice?
Not, well, I was a music major at Cal Lutheran University, and I did study with private teachers, associate, and teachers like that. But I didn't graduate from a music school. No, but I started performing professionally when I was about 18. So, well, maybe 16 actually.
So at that point, you probably felt like if somebody's paying you money, you don't need to go to school for it.
Well, I always was taking classes. I always was, privately, taking lessons.
Do you still?
Not anymore. No.
Sometimes I bump into people that have been in the business for 30, 40 years, and they're still taking lessons because that's just their thing. They just like to take lessons.
Yeah, I don't think it's a bad idea. I have, many friends who coach with people, professional singers who coach with other professional singers who teach when they're getting ready for shows, especially. And yeah, I think that's a great idea.
And same question for you, Richard. Did you formally train somewhere with your voice?
I really don't have much extensive formal training as either a singer or actor, although over the years, starting with the musical theater workshop at LA City College, as well as studying with Karen Morrow, who you may be familiar with.
Sure.
She had her basically musical theater singing technique, interpretation. She was really helpful with that. And then I've occasionally taken, I would say kind of brush up vocal classes with,
so both of you,
teachers.
what I think you're saying, which is I think interesting for the listeners to understand, is both of you were basically trained by doing it, not by going to formal classes or going and getting a degree in it or something like that, though you had little bits and pieces of training along the way, but nothing in a formal setting where you went to school, 5 days a week or whatever it would be. And I think it's important to understand, which is something I think not everybody gets today, is you don't need a formal education in order to be in the arts. I think it's helpful sometimes, but it's not the least bit necessary. So I'm wondering when you two met. How did you meet?
Well, let's see. Let me first tell you that my parents, Marilyn and Charlie Davis, they met in New York. My dad was playing the leprechaun in Finian's Rainbow. Okay. He had been brought over from Ireland at 19 years of age.
He is an actual Irish native.
He is. And I've just been informed that I'm an Irish citizen because I'm his daughter, which I just found out. Which is really cool. But yes, he came over at 19, joined the company. He replaced David Wayne as the leprechaun.
Right.
Then my mother was playing across the street in Irving Berlin's Miss Liberty, which was she was cast actually by Irving Berlin. She had a singing, speaking part. It was one of her first shows, and she was also very young. And they met each other when the cast of Finian's Rainbow was starting a national touring company, and they were holding auditions for who wanted to go on the road. And my dad decided he would leave Broadway and go on the road. He'd done it for like a year or so on Broadway. And my mother auditioned then, and she got chosen. And they met in the national touring company of Finian's Rainbow, and came out to California, and never went back to New York, except for vacations. But they started a life here in California. My dad started a theater called the Hollywood Repertory Theater, and they did tons of musicals. And my dad became a director as well. And they had the longest running musical in Hollywood history at the time of Finian's Rainbow. It ran for like 11 months or something. And in fact, Richard Burton did a walk-on guest appearance for my dad in that show. Very, very funny. But my dad and mom, were always in theater and musicals. And so many, many years later, and they're still in the business. I'm a little girl, and my first musical was Finian's Rainbow.
Oh, wow.
My father was directing it many years ago, summer stock. And I, of course, knew all the lyrics. So I was in the chorus as a child. And then fast forward again, and my dad is now able to play Finian because he's older. And so
Sure.
He's playing the leprechaun. He's directing a new production of Finian's Rainbow. He's playing Finian as well. And he asked me if I would play Sharon, which was the part my mom played. And I was like, over the moon. And so that's where Richard comes into play. We were in rehearsals with a cast and another actor playing Woody when he had an emergency in his family. And Woody is the character that plays opposite Sharon. And he had to leave the show. And with 2 weeks to go before opening night, Richard was contacted by our producer and brought in to fill that spot. And we literally met on stage. I walked into rehearsal that night and he was on stage reading lines, and I got into the tree, which Sharon comes down from the tree and meets him on stage. And that's how we actually met, on stage.
Wow. Wow.
So
So
really fun.
it was fated.
It was wonderful. We had a really fun time and really great chemistry, and yeah.
Did you immediately recognize that you had a shared vocal quality that would work well together, or was that something you figured out later?
I think we figured it out during the show. Wouldn't you say, Richard? Everybody was talking about our chemistry, and we kind of had a really neat energy on stage, and a playful banter that we brought to the parts. A little bit of humor that maybe wouldn't always be there with some of the scenes, and we sort of always brought sort of a playfulness and a humor to it, in the appropriate scenes, and we just had a lot of fun. And then after we closed, we ran for a couple months. We broke all records. We had standing room only, and they extended as long as they could. And then when it finally closed, Richard approached me a week later and said, "What do you think about doing a cabaret act and just having fun with some new music?" And
so what year was this? How long have you been doing this together?
this is about 10 years ago.
About 10 years ago. So it's been a development of the act itself and what you're going to do in it. So I'll ask Richard then, one of the interesting things about talking to people that work together like you do is that there has to be, and you obviously found this when you met at Finian's Rainbow, there has to be some kind of chemistry to make it work. And it's always a mystery, I think, as to how that chemistry comes about. Did you sense that chemistry, Richard, right away?
Well, in the words of Sky Masterson, chemistry. Yeah, I did. It was obvious. I felt it when we were on stage and even in rehearsals. Although I was studying like mad because I had 2 weeks to do this. Yeah, cramming, to put it mildly. But
sometimes that's the best way to have it happen, when you've got no choice but your back's against the wall and you got to figure it out now.
Yeah.
Well, in the history of theater, there has been such thing as summer stock and repertory theater, especially in England. And sometimes you're doing, maybe half a dozen shows, one after the other, with very little rehearsal time. So, but this was, it's not like I was doing Hamlet, but it was a rush, and
it's a big part.
Fortunately, we were in good hands, and one of the reasons I wanted to do it was because the producer who I'd worked with before at this theater had said, "Oh, it's being directed by the guy who played the Leprechaun originally on Broadway," and I went, "Huh?" And so, it meant a lot that we were in Charlie's good hands. And so, I could just concentrate on getting the part under my belt. And after that, we were, off to the races. So, but again, in answer to your question, yeah.
Did you sing together in the show?
Oh, yeah.
You did sing together in the show. So that I imagine immediately had some impact on, hey, we sound good together.
Yeah, they sing Old Devil Moon together. That's their duet. And as a matter of fact, it's kind of our theme song. Well, at least it's something of a it's a piece of music that means a lot to us. With it not only being one of the big hits of the show, but we've used it. We've performed it live in our cabaret shows.
How important when you're singing it live is it that it has that emotional resonance for you? How much does that impact the delivery of the performance?
For me, it's everything.
Everything.
Yeah, for me, it's everything.
You have to have something to attach emotionally to, yes?
Yeah, for me, yes, I would say absolutely. Mm-hmm.
All right, so the chemistry that you immediately saw, and I'll get off the chemistry thing in a moment, but I really think it's important for the listeners to understand that that this chemistry, that you didn't go out and manufacture it; it's just there, right?
Yeah, it was. Mm-hmm.
And
it always is. It's not anything you can manufacture.
You can't manufacture it. But my question is, can you develop it? Can it be made better? Can you deepen it through any particular specific effort? or does it just nature takes its course when it comes to that connection between two performers? Richard, I'm wondering about what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I'd go with the latter. It's nature taking its course. It's not anything I ever thought I wanted to mess with once we'd established it.
And Mary Pat, same thought?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think if you happen to be paired with someone, like the gentleman I was paired with before Richard was, before he left, I don't think we would have had the same chemistry, but I think we would have done okay. And I think, it's kind of an acting question too, because you want to kind of lose yourself in that part. And I think if you kind of surrender to the part, or the actor, singing a song, telling a story, if you allow yourself to surrender to the part, you could kind of get into that a little bit. It might not be as easy and as natural or as powerful as the chemistry that's just there, but I think you can kind of develop it a little bit.
Well, I think that the great singers are great actors. Don't you agree?
God, yeah.
And when and that's why so many singers, famous singers over time, have wound up acting in movies and on stage, because they're already having to find something within themselves to communicate through the lyrics and the song. So they're not just singing beats and notes. There's some kind of power behind it that's emotional. And so when I listen to the two of you sing, because I've listened to a bunch of your stuff at this point, I can tell that you're passionate about what you're doing, that there's something behind what you're singing. You're not just singing. And do you have to work at that at all, or is it just there?
For me, it's there. I just, I love
just there.
I love what I do. It's just there. Yeah.
You don't need to rehearse for it, in other words.
No, just rehearse the technical stuff and then let it go. And it's like, as a dancer, that's what you do too. I think the best dancers, as well as the best singers, you practice, the hard stuff, and you learn your harmony, you learn your words, you learn your phrasing, whatever you need to learn technically. But then you got to throw it out the window and go with your heart a little bit.
Well, at some point you have to stop thinking about it entirely and just do it, right?
Just do it. Yeah.
Just like an athlete, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Same for you, Richard?
Yeah, definitely. Because, when Sinatra used to say that he was acting all the time he was a kid in front of the big bands and just didn't know it. Because at the end of the day, an actor and a singer, they're both storytellers. Great songs are little scenes, little stories. If they're constructed interestingly, I think that's true. And as you said, so many people who started out as singers, in recording studios or wherever, if they
wind up acting, right?
Yeah, sure. If they had a little luck and some good looks, and it all, they could bring that to the movies, to the stage, whatever.
Is there anything that you need today to inspire you to sing what you sing? Do you need some kind of inspiration beyond the song?
No, I don't think so.
You find it within the song itself.
Yeah, we're really we search really, really hard for the songs we sing. We choose them really carefully.
What makes a good song good? What do you look for when you're trying to find a song? What do you want?
Well, I've always liked, as a performer, I like to reach out and touch people in some way, either, touch them, make them feel something, romantic or emotional or sentimental or happy, make them, something that lifts you up. So I think I gravitate to those kinds of songs. Sentimental, well, from our album, you can tell we have a lot of, happy songs and fun songs and sassy songs, and then there's a few tearjerkers in there, like "Where Have You Been" and stuff.
They all come from the heart somehow.
They do, yeah.
So they're not mechanical in any way. They're not, they're good old fashioned, from the heart songs. That's what I was listening to anyway. Richard, same for you?
Well, I think we always look at a individual tune and see how it strikes us emotionally. Because I think our job after that is to convey that emotion to an audience member. We're open to the whole gamut of emotions. She just the sassy tunes, by the way. I have nothing to do with those. but anything that
You're
kind
not
of,
sassy. Is that what you're saying? You're
I'm
anti-sassy?
unsassy. Yeah,
Unsassy.
I'm the sassyless, overly serious actor.
And he does voices. He does really funny voices, Steve.
Is that right?
Yeah.
He does. Yeah, you should do a couple voices for him.
Well, I may be inspired toward the end of this interview. Anyway, so that's that's how we go about it, and I think she said it just right. We have to have some kind of reaction to it, and find some emotional through line and meaning that we can convey to an audience.
Has anyone
Live.
ever suggested that the two of you sing something and both of you went, no, that's not for us?
I can't think of anything.
Shelley Markham always suggested some, really cool songs that we did, and trying to think.
So in other words, people know what you're all about, so they're going to suggest to you things that they think are in your pocket.
Yeah, I think Shelley tuned into us. Shelley arranged all the tunes on the.
Yeah.
Tell the listeners who Shelley Markham is.
Oh, Richard, you tell everybody who Shelley Markham is. He's fabulous.
Well, Shelley, who's still going strong, he's relocated back east to North Carolina, right? I always get North and South mixed up, but anyway,
they're right next to each other. That's
yes, that's it. Wherever Durham is, that's
North Carolina.
North Carolina. Thank you. Shelley's a remarkable musician, pianist, arranger, composer. He sings. He's done his own CD. He has composed entire musicals.
And he was Andre Marcovicci's musical director for, I don't know, 25, 30 years?
Yes. Yeah. That's kind of one of his extraordinary accomplishments.
Andrea Marcovicci, also from the cabaret world.
Yes, definitely. Well, she was until she just retired recently. In fact, we saw her final show in New York. She was basically the queen of cabaret.
She started midnight at the Gardenia. She did midnight shows, 12 midnight shows. Really.
Yeah. And she's a friend too. At least we're
she's
lucky
been
to call her a friend, and she said some very nice things about our CD as well. Shelley's had a long, wonderful relationship,
incredible
with
career.
her. And we were very lucky to get him, because he's in demand for what he does, but he just took a shine to us, I'd say, right?
Yeah, and he just came up with some wonderful ideas and then arrangements on songs we wanted to do. Like an example would be Old Devil Moon. My mom had an arrangement of Old Devil Moon that she had done for her back in New York, back in like the 50s or so. And I think it was by the man who did the music for Some Like It Hot. And he was just really like the top guy. And it was this really cool counterpoint kind of feel, jazz kind of counterpoint feel. And we showed it to Shelley and we said, we kind of want to start with this, but then we want to do something else. And we kind of told him what we had in mind. And he just came up with this whole new arrangement for Old Devil Moon that we love. And,
and that's become your standard then, yes?
Yeah, that's probably our favorite.
All right, so let's talk about how you get into the performance itself. You have to make a decision at some point. We're going to sing X number of songs and it's going to be these songs. Typically, about how many songs are in your show?
Usually about 14-ish, give or take a couple.
14 or 15.
Essentially an album's worth.
Yeah. And usually, and then there's like an encore and stuff. So we usually have a couple extras there, but yeah.
And me talking, of course.
Well, yeah, we have to.
You got to have the banter, right? And do you write your own material on the banter, or do you just let it fly?
We kind of let it fly.
I make it up, baby, as I go along, with mixed results, actually. But
well, I usually have to tell them, hey, we gotta get on with the song now. Stop talking.
You have to. You're gonna have some failure if you're gonna just wing it. You've got no testing on it. So do you? When once you've got the songs in hand, okay, we're gonna do these 12, 14 songs, whatever it is. What's the first step that you do? Do you start to rehearse together? Do you start to arrange together? Do you decide what order they're going in? What's your first step?
We usually start rehearsing with the pianist that's going to play for us, and before we set the order. We usually just pick the songs and work with them first before we decide, we kind of sometimes have an idea that this is going to be, in the first couple numbers, or this would be a good closer, but we don't make final decisions until we've rehearsed a bit with the pianist and, made little tweaks. And yeah.
She entirely makes up the order. I have nothing to do with that. So I seriously, I totally trust her. Well,
that makes your job even easier, Richard.
I know. I'll just make up my part and
Mary
let her do the hard work.
The load
but
oh my gosh.
Do you ever rehearse a song and say, nope, not going to be in the show?
Yeah, I think we've thrown songs out before. Said, not this show. Let's think about that. Or that's, we need to play with that a little more. I don't like, this is not special enough. We haven't got a handle on it,
And what then becomes your criterion for deciding how to program the show? In other words, you're going to do the songs. I'm going to guess, you correct me if I'm wrong, the songs have an emotional order, and that you start at one place and you want to take it to another place. And how do you make that decision? I'm going to guess Mary Pat does all the decision making here too.
You bet.
How do you decide how do you put it together?
Each show has been a little different. We usually have kind of a theme, but it's not scripted by any means, but we're not completely flying blind. We have an idea what we want to say.
Sure, of course you do.
He'll say, I'd like to introduce this one because I want to talk about whatever. Or we'll say we're both going to talk before this one. And sometimes we've done shows, Here's to Love, what was, I think, our first show, and it was all love songs, but we kind of tried to cover the arc of love, like first love, and then, in the middle, and maybe there's conflicts, and then songs that are more sad toward the end. And, we sort of kind of, had a wide variety of love songs on that theme. And we did kind of put it through an arc, and there's always humor. We always have humor in there. I like to think our shows are kind of packed with, actually a really pretty healthy dose of both humor and sentimentality.
Humor in the songs or humor in between?
Oh, humor just in the show. Yeah, in the shows.
So you're not doing comedy songs?
No.
That's what
really.
I was wondering.
I mean, not really. Once in a while there'll be something in there, but no, I mean kind of our talking. And
do you think of the songs as trying to reach an emotional peak, some kind of a climax within the whole of the event?
Yeah, it depends on the song and depends on the show. We did a movie, what do we call it, Richard? Moonlight and Love Songs.
Right.
And it was all songs from movies. So that was kind of a potpourri in a way. That didn't have a particular order. That was just some of our favorite songs put into amazing arrangements from all these different wonderful movies. And
right. We might have grouped by composer, like we would do all Henry Mancini's tunes in one piece, or Elmer Bernstein's love theme from The Magnificent Seven. I remember that especially.
How do you sing that?
It's actually a joke, Steve. But
you could also do the theme from Psycho, but that would be
that's
also
true.
Challenging.
Yeah. The string portion's a bit tough to get through, but
that Bernard Herrmann, great song.
I know. Absolutely. Hey, he wrote a whole opera for Orson Welles, so
all right,
can you go wrong?
So now you've got your songs, you know what you're going to sing. You've already tested them a little bit by playing with the piano player. Now what do? Do you start to rehearse them in earnest, or do you let things happen more organically in the performance? In other words, I guess the question for me is, how tight are you in going into the show, or are you somewhat loose about how you approach?
We've done it a couple different ways. We were working with someone a few years back where it was a little tighter. He was a little more rigid and scripted, and so we did a couple of shows like that. But I think our basic style is, to map things out with the pianists that we work with, and then to tape the songs. We get everything on tape, and we rehearse vocally to figure out what harmonies we want to do and just to get everything feeling really good. But we don't like to over rehearse, on the other hand. Sometimes we stage things a little bit, but we don't I don't like things that are overly studied and overly.
Does it become stiff for you? Does it?
It just feels a little fake, and
It feels fake.
I like it to be real.
You want it to feel organic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think those are always better shows when it feels like you're just doing it rather than, although there's a flip argument there, isn't there? You talk about Finian's Rainbow. Here's you go back and you look at Fred Astaire, and Fred Astaire, who did the movie version of Finian's Rainbow, but he used to practice or rehearse so much that he made it look effortless, like he was just winging it. But that came through enormous amounts of effort. Right. And so then you get the opposite of that, which is Dean Martin, who would just show up on set and do it and hardly rehearse at all. And obviously you're somewhere in between. You like to rehearse enough, but not over rehearse it.
Yeah, that's true.
And do you find that causes you ever to make mistakes in performance? Are you pretty good at not?
It's funny when you're working with another person, because I've done, solo shows myself, and then I had an act with my mom for years. And then Richard is a little more, he'll just start saying things. What are you doing? He'll go off. And I don't mean so much in the songs, but in the talking. And sometimes that'll be kind of throw me off, but I think it's kind of funny. I really do. I mean, you're going to have little hiccups once in a while, but I think it's worth it, for the spontaneity and the fun.
Of course, she's a dancer, so she wants to choreograph every number.
No.
And then I roll my eyes and sweat, and but
are you not a good dancer, Richard?
I am not. I used to call myself euphemistically, I'm a leading man who moves well, but even that was stretching it. So
no, you're good. You're not bad at all. I've worked with way more difficult actors and singers.
I know.
I taught dance.
I've worked with a few actors that were excellent singers but couldn't move at all.
Yeah.
So I understand the problem, if in fact that's your problem, but it sounds like it's not really your problem. So all right, what is then, as you go into your performances, which you are both rehearsed and loose at the same time, which is what it sounds like, what would you say are the biggest challenges in live performance for you? What do you both find are the things that you have to then consider the most? In other words, what challenges are you faced with regularly, if any?
I would say, for me anyway, when you do one night shows, you're kind of dealing with a new venue, new setup just for that one night, and that's kind of hard. It's nice to have a run. It's nice to have a run like you do when you're in a musical. So I mean, that makes, obviously, that's not what cabaret is, but it's nice when you can do a show a few times. So we've had that opportunity, thank goodness, a lot. But sometimes we've done just one show one time, and that's kind of not as fulfilling, if you will, because you feel like you're just getting into it, and you could, relax and do it so much more, I don't know, more freely. You could.
I think you're saying that it's about comfort level of the venue itself.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I guess so.
Same for you, Richard?
I'm not sure I worry so much about, coming to a new place or I'm usually fairly comfortable in any venue I happen to be at. I'm just kind of focused more on the mechanics of things, not screwing up on my lyrics, and just remembering that there's a, particular funny little change of key at this part in the song, and things like that. So it's just pretty much, mechanical.
What would you say that you, Richard, have learned in live performance over the years that you now didn't know in the beginning, but you repeat? Is there anything that you now say, oh, I do this regularly? I wish I knew this when I was 18.
That's a good question. From a theater point of view, I would say it's just, this is very Stanislavski system-esque, and I'm mentioning this because I actually have rejoined a theater company I was with 20 years ago, and I'm in a Stanislavski workshop right now. It is just being in the moment and being present and let things happen organically. Hopefully it's supported by a much better technique than I had when I was 18, but also listening That's one of the biggest things you can do all
You've
the
got to
time.
listen to each other, I assume.
Right. Whether it's in a, just a straight acting scene, or singing with a partner, or somebody that you're doing a duet with in a show. It's just very important. It's just being available as an artist, and a lot of that has to do with listening.
Hmm. Mary Pat, I'm wondering, what have you learned over the years that you now wish you knew back then, but you now repeat?
I think I've really learned how to pace myself. I used to just go full throttle from the very beginning, and my mom would be saying to me, "Why are you running around doing this? And you got a show tonight, you just, you need to rest, and you need to, I just always was kind of going 100 miles an hour because I've got a lot of energy. And so I think, I mean, that's just a very personal thing, but I've just learned how to pace myself.
Hmm.
And I feel like it makes me a better performer because I have more to give, and I'm more, more there and more present in the moment.
Well, yeah, I would imagine it is, because if you're tired or not there at the moment, your mind has wandered, you're not going to be giving
Right,
as
right,
good
right.
of a show.
Yeah.
And it's the same with any performance, I would think, which is a little different than just working at a job, where you can slack off a little bit in certain jobs. You can not pay attention for a little while. You have to be on all the time when you're on stage.
Yeah, you do.
Mm.
Yeah.
I think
And listening.
I think it was Richard Burton who once said that, he would be thinking, he'd done shows so many times, or Camelot, whatever it was, that he was actually thinking about, oh, I've got to pick up that laundry today, and I've got to get certain groceries. And he wasn't even paying any attention to what he was doing. He was just on automatic.
Yeah.
Have you ever experienced that, either one of you, where you were on autopilot?
I haven't actually, but in rehearsal, probably in a play or something, in rehearsal, but never on a show. I'm really into my shows. But I certainly understand that. And I teach, so I have acting and singing students, and I see them sometimes zone out, when they're doing vocalises or something, and I'll say, "Wait a minute, where are you?" And oh yeah, I was thinking about, that I have to go here afterwards. And you can't do that. You have to be right there in the moment to get the most out of everything,
Well, that notion of the Stanislavski being in the moment and present, as Richard was alluding to, that is everything to performance.
It really is. Yeah.
I think it is. If you're not present and there right now, it shows. It
Yeah.
becomes mechanical, or it becomes uninteresting, or whatever that might be. I want to talk for a moment about recording. You've done a little bit of recording over time. And how do you approach recording, which is a different process than live performance, where you're now having to try to do something to give the sense of a live performance, but you're in a studio and there's no audience? Do you have a way that you are like, that you can psych yourself into it, where you can think your way through it differently than when you're actually in front of a crowd?
I had done recording in Nashville and LA, solo recording
Mm-hmm.
in a variety of settings, variety of studios. So I think I was well prepared for our CD, which was great. We had a great setup at the studio where we worked. Paul Tavener, big city studios. Really wonderful. He's a wonderful engineer, and it was just so comfortable, and the musicians were so amazing. It was, one of the best recording experiences I had had. So I felt really relaxed. And again, I think just anybody recording, that's sort of the trick, is to just relax and not feel like you're recording, because you want it to be real and spontaneous, and yet you do have some technical things you have to think about, and you have to be thinking of the mic but not fixated on the mic. You have to kind of get where you're supposed to be, and then close your eyes and relax, and get into the song. I found that pretty easy for me with our CD, because I just loved the songs, and I loved the arrangements, and felt really comfortable. Richard, I know, I think was that your first recording, Richard, with our CD, in terms of recording?
Yeah, it was the first time I'd been in a studio to actually perform with with a band, and with our own arrangements.
And how was that for you? How did you experience that when you suddenly were doing it? You were on stage without an audience.
Yeah, I found it to be a very different process and a little intimidating. I'd almost like to do another CD, uh, you know, because I think I know how to go about it a little more sanely.
Easier, maybe.
Huh?
Maybe you'd feel it was easier the next time.
Oh, definitely.
I think you
Yeah.
did.
That's what experience does for everything, huh?
Yeah.
It does. And I was actually watching Mary Pat's process, which she seemed just right at home in the studio. And then when we were listening to playbacks, she takes herself to a very zen kind of spot. And I'm listening to these things. I'm going, well, oh, that's not too bad. Oh, I like how I did that take, and that phrasing was kind of sloppy, and I'm a little pitchy in that phrase, and things like that. But I think she was kind of taking the whole experience and the whole song from beginning to end, and I think that's probably just aesthetically the better approach in the studio.
And it's something that
Which
you really can't do in live performance, right? In front of a crowd, you can't really stop and analyze what you're doing and break it down line by line.
Yeah.
no, you can't. And I think you were talking about kind of putting yourself on autopilot. I think that's mostly true. I suspect it's mostly true if you're in a very, very long run, like I'm sure Burton was with Camelot, and even as Hamlet, I think broke box office records at the time, and I think ran longer than Barrymore's, if I remember correctly. But he used to say that he always was trying to find in his performance what he called stillness. In other words, getting the greatest possible effect with the least visible effort. And I've always found that something to an interesting thing to try to approach in both acting, especially straight acting, and Shakespeare even, as well as singing.
Being still. Do you have the same take on that, Mary Pat? That calmness is key.
Yeah, I think what Richard, if I'm understanding what he means, I think he's saying you're not working so hard. You're quote relaxed enough and just at peace enough with the piece and what you're doing, that you're really in the moment, and you're just, I mean, it sounds so cliche, but you're just flowing with what you're doing. You're not overthinking it. You're not stressing. You're not thinking ahead. You're just right there trying to be a vessel for those words, for that song, and it's understated in a way because it flows more naturally, is what I think.
Am I correct to assume that you're just saying be in the moment in a different way?
In a quiet way? Yeah.
In a quiet way.
Yeah.
That you're allowing it all in rather than forcing it in some way.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's the hallmark of great performances. Is it feels like it's just flowing, like there's like it's flowing through the performer rather than the performer is generating it.
Yeah.
I mean, look, there are some legendary performers and stars who, I mean, man, they come on and they're gonna sell this tune if it's the last thing they do, if it kills them. And that's a perfectly, depending upon their personality, it sometimes may be a perfectly legitimate way to try to perform a piece. But I've always been I'm kind of the Dean Martin school. I just kind of come on and just don't take it terrifically seriously, and just be relaxed, and don't let them see you sweat. So
I think we're very different that way, though, Steve. Richard is much more laid back, if you will, and I'm a bit hyper, so you can kind of tell.
Is that a good yin yang?
I think it is good. I think it is a good combination. It's actually very similar to the dynamic I had with my mom when she and I would perform. My mom was very elegant, and I mean, she had a great sense of humor and everything. Richard knew my mom. She was, just very elegant, and I had a different energy. Our reviews of our shows when we would perform together would mention that, and it was always in a positive way. And I feel like Richard and I have that same counterbalance, which is, I think it's good.
He's the laid back, he's the straight man to your more active performer.
Probably. Yeah.
I think so. When I've seen the videos of you, that's what it seems like. You're actually got the higher energy than Richard, but it's not like he has no energy. It's that he's more laid back than you. That's all.
Yeah, it's just style, I think. Definitely people have different style, and everybody has to find their style and tune into their own style.
Well, for sure. For sure. Yeah. But at the same time, you have this, I guess it would be a difference for many single solo performers. You actually have to mesh in some way. You have to become a unit, not two individuals that we're only hearing the two individuals. You have to become one at some point.
Yeah, the duets are trickier for sure. They are. I like them a lot, but it is more, you have to really be on the ball. You have to be in the moment, because otherwise you're going to do things your own way and you won't be together. You have to be, you're part of a team, and you have to be tuned into one another. And it's cool. It's very cool, but it does require a little different focus, different concentration.
Is there a trick to it?
I think we've been lucky. A lot of it has to do with that. It just worked out the way it did, and like we were, talking about chemistry earlier, it just kind of happens, and it just happened in our case that whatever qualities and strengths we each brought individually just meshed really well on stage.
Well, and 10 years of doing it helps.
I don't know about that, but we can bicker like an old married couple if you want to hear it. But we actually
right away from the start. We did that.
Yeah, I know.
But you know what? That's to me, that's an indication that you care. If you never bickered, or at least never disagreed about anything, I'm not sure that you care. So I think that's great. True. So I have been speaking to Maripat Davis and Richard Osborn for almost an hour now, and we're gonna take this thing toward the tail end of the show. And I'm just wondering, Ellie, ask each of you, in all of your experiences, and you've been doing this for a number of years, and can you relate or share with us a story in which something weird, strange, quirky, offbeat, or maybe just plain funny has happened to you?
It had to do with a kind of a weird play. I was playing Banquo in Shakespeare's Macbeth in West Hollywood. And, Orson Welles used to say that...
You should have said the Scottish play, by the way.
Oh, no, that only works. That's only happens in the theater.
All right. This is my theater.
Okay. Well, I can always go out the door, spit, and turn around 3 times and come back in. Or I think the Brits do something different. In any case, Orson Welles used to say that it had a kind of funny, hard luck reputation as a play. A lot of it probably had to do with the fact that it's kind of dark and oppressive and has, it's violent and bloody and has occult elements in it with witches and all that. And I actually ended up getting probably the best reviews I've ever gotten in the Los Angeles Times, no less. And it all ended up Gone with the Wind, because it was the only play that I actually got sacked from. I got into I don't even remember what it was about, to be honest. It was some stupid argument with the director. And he just said, okay, well, I don't think we need you to show up again for the next performance. So that was that, which was just kind of a weird experience. One of the funniest ones happened when I was playing James Naughton's old part in the musical City of Angels. It was
sure.
the private eye, who's kind of inspired by Philip Marlowe. And I don't know if you know the show, Steve, but
I do.
there's the, the the private eye is actually part of a kind of film noir movie within the musical. It's kind of hard to describe, but he's kind of in the imagination of this young this young novelist, excuse me, who's called to Hollywood to write the screenplay for the movie adaptation of his book. That's the setup. Anyway, when I was doing it actually I was at the same theater that we did Finian's Rainbow, but several years prior to that, we were doing a performance of the show, and the theater got hit by a really nasty aftershock to the Northridge earthquake.
Okay.
And I mean the lights on the battens overhead were swinging kind of dangerously, so that happened. And the character Stone, the detective, has a scene where he walks into his apartment, and the place has been basically turned upside down by, I forgot who it was, the crooks or the cops or whoever it was. And he has a line, "It looks like this place was turned upside down by an earthquake or hit by an earthquake," or something like that. And the audience just roared. And I got rattled, and I skipped like a half page of dialogue. It was the weirdest experience. So, and it actually happened on the night that we were taping the show. So I actually have proof of that somewhere in a closet.
Mary Pat?
Let's see. I was doing Gypsy, and I had a little Chinese pug dog who was part of the cast. He got to be in one scene. And so he was kept backstage, in a dressing room with stagehands and stuff until his scene. And I was on stage with Rose and Herbie. I was playing Gypsy. We were singing together wherever we go. And this was an outdoor equity production with huge audience out in front of us, and steps that come up to the stage. And suddenly we're in the middle of the number, and we hear the audience laughing. I mean, we have no idea why they're laughing, because we're in the middle of singing, and we were kind of looking at each other wondering, why are they laughing? And suddenly I see that out of the corner of my eye, this little ball of fur coming toward me. And I looked, and it's my pug, Snooper. And he's gotten onto the stage. He's gotten loose, and he's gotten onto the stage, and he's running toward me. And of course, I picked him up, finished the number, and we got, huge response at the end of the number. But it was so unexpected. I've never had a dog do that before. So that was pretty funny.
It would have only been better if you were doing Annie.
Yes, that would have been more appropriate. And then another thing, wasn't really funny, but it was kind of one of the most touching, interesting experiences I've ever had. I was playing a fair, I think it was the California Mid-State Fair, and it was booked just a solo artist with a band, and it was just me and the band. And came to the end of the show, and I was doing a gospel medley, and it was kind of a rousing thing. And I said, I noticed these kids dancing in front of the stage, and I said, if anybody wants to come up and join me, feel free. Suddenly there was all these children coming to the edge of the stage, and these women was holding up her baby, and I picked up the baby, and I'm singing with the microphone, and I have like 30 kids on stage with me dancing around me. And it was just the most, I got goosebumps, because I love kids, and it was just so unexpected and so wild. And, I don't know, it was one of the most cool experiences.
And unexpected, and you had to go with the flow.
Yeah, it was beautiful. Yeah. So that was kind of a sweet, sweet moment.
That is a nice, that is a really nice moment. All right. Well, last question for each of you, and we'll start with Mary Pat. So in all of your experiences, can you share, for those who are maybe starting out in the business, or maybe in a little bit and trying to get to the next level, some piece of advice that you think is valuable that will help them?
There's so much, honestly, but I think the most important thing is to be careful who you listen to. You have to listen to yourself first, and you have to, my dad always said you had to develop a thick skin, but not let it, hurt the soft interior, because you don't want to become hard and jaded. But you have to be able to take rejection. You have to be able to take criticism. and you don't want it to hurt you. You don't want it to destroy you as a person or an artist. So you have to develop a really strong, a strong spirit, I think, and be careful who you surround yourself with, and always study and always learn, and there's always growing, and I think it's ongoing. We're never done. We're always a work in progress. But I think people have to believe in themselves. I know it sounds, trite, but I think you really do have to believe in yourself and follow your heart, and listen to yourself, and don't let people steer you on a different path. Follow your gut. Don't try to be what you're not. Do what you do and do it well, and try to get better at it, and your time will come.
That's a great amount of terrific advice all in one fell swoop. And so I think it's really important stuff, especially believe in yourself. I mean, if you don't believe in yourself, who else is going to? So you must. I think it's really important. Richard, same question. Do you have a solid piece of advice or a tip for those trying to break in, or maybe they're in a little bit?
Well, I'd say a ditto to everything Maripat said. I'd also add, always be open to new possibilities and keep learning. Like I was saying earlier, I've joined a theater group, rejoined a theater group I was with some years back, and I find even more than getting up and doing scene work or whatever, I'm enjoying listening to Jack Stalin, who is the artistic director of the group. Listening to him expound on Stanislavski and theater and his experiences, and seeing other people getting up and work and discussing that, it's eye-opening, even with as many years as I've been at it. So always be willing to keep studying and keep learning, whether it's music or acting, and understand that a lot of this business, David Niven used to say this, it really does depend upon luck. But if that's the case, then always try to be ready, be prepared for that lucky moment should it happen to you. And that means just keep active, keep taking classes and studying.
Some great individual, I always think it's Thomas Jefferson, and I may be wrong about it, but used to say, the harder I work, the luckier I get.
Yeah.
My first manager used to always quote that.
There's some truth to that. You're certainly not going to get lucky just by sitting around, unless something really strange happens, but then you have to prove yourself, don't you?
Yeah,
That's right.
Even if you're just walking down the street and somebody plucked you out of the crowd and said, you're going to be a star, and you go, oh, what am I supposed to do with that, unless you know what you're doing? So yeah, you got to work at it. Maripat Davis, Richard Osborn, this has been just a terrific, fun-filled hour on StoryBeat, and I've yet to see you live in performance, and I hope someday I get the opportunity to see you doing your thing on stage, because I think it would be a great evening. So I want to thank you kindly, both of you, for being on the show today.
Oh, thank you.
It's great. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
And so we've come to the end of today's StoryBeat. If you like this episode, won't you please take a moment to give us a comment, rating, or review on whatever app or platform you're listening to. Your support helps us bring more great StoryBeat episodes to you. StoryBeat is available on all major podcast apps and platforms, including Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, TuneIn, and many others. Until next time, I'm Steve Cuden, and may all your stories be unforgettable.